U.S. President Donald Trump is due to hold a White House meeting on Gaza later this Wednesday. His special Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, says post-war plans for the Strip will be discussed. Witkoff also says the U.S. expects the war to be settled by the end of this year. Heidi Zhou-Castro has more from Washington.
President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff says Gaza's post-war future will be discussed at a White House meeting on Wednesday, and that the meeting will be chaired by Trump. Witkoff did not offer any details on this meeting, but said that a post-war plan would be, quote, comprehensive and reflect Trump's humanitarian motives. Witkoff also said he was confident that the war would end this year, even as Israel has so far declined to respond to the current ceasefire offer that's on the table. Witkoff said Hamas could encourage Israel to more quickly accept the deal by, he said, feeding the captives. Gaza City is in a state of famine where 500,000 people are nearing starvation, while the remaining 2 million people of Gaza are struggling with severe hunger. Witkoff was also asked to respond to the deadly Israeli military strike on Nasser hospital, which has been denounced by some world leaders as a war crime. Witkoff said civilian deaths are indeed a tragedy. Heidi Zhou-Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Joining me now is Abdullah Al-Arian. He's an associate professor at Georgetown University here in Qatar. Abdullah, good to see you. Other than Donald Trump describing it as a large meeting, what more details do we have about this Witkoff-Trump gathering on Gaza, which is due to take place later in Washington?
Well, we don't know much, but frankly, there's not much to it, I think. I mean, everything we've seen up to this point is the fact that the U.S. seems to be less and less interested in any kind of, resolution anytime soon. I think even the Israeli press has reported that in recent weeks, the U.S. has essentially been hands-off, at least insofar as mediation efforts toward any kind of a ceasefire, whether short-term, long-term, any of that is concerned. And I think, we have to get to a point where we start to see these efforts at negotiation, mediation, as being in some ways actually an extension of the genocide, as being very much part and parcel of the overall destructive motivations that Israel had, considering, of course, the fact that you have a mediator in the U.S. that is very much an active partner in the genocide itself, that has been arming endlessly the Israeli military, that has shielded it from any kind of international condemnation, let alone actual action on the part of the UN or any other body, whether it's the ICC or the ICJ. And in that sense, I think it's quite clear, not to mention the fact that the U.S. has also undermined any and all humanitarian efforts and has instead replaced it with essentially a killing machine in this new, aid organization, supposedly, that has been massacring Palestinians by the hundreds over the last couple of months.
And Abdullah, when we look at the narrative that is coming from Israel in regards to Gaza, it seems to have gone in the last few weeks from trying to push forward this idea of a partial ceasefire deal, at least, to now saying blatantly that it wants to fully occupy Gaza. So how do you square that with the U.S. attempting at least to show that it is trying to come up with some sort of resolution?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is why sometimes it's dangerous to fall into the trap of assuming that these negotiations are happening in good faith, when we know that ultimately Israel is quite clear about its own intentions. It has been clear about those intentions really from the very start, and has been very vocally expressing them in a way that has not gotten any kind of pushback from its biggest ally in the United States. And so in some ways, those things don't square, in part because we know that the actual discussions around a ceasefire agreement are meant to go nowhere. I mean, again, how many times have we heard reports that, Hamas, for its part at least, has accepted the terms of whatever the mediators in Qatar and Egypt have put forward. And then on the other side, of course, Israel not only has rejected, but actually doesn't even bother to respond to these efforts. So at a certain point, I think even those mediators have to start beginning to think about alternative modes, right? If you can't bring a genocidal state to the table to actually negotiate an end to the genocide, then ultimately there has to be kind of an external intervention on the part of these international bodies that we keep talking about, but which, of course, have taken no concrete actions.
I mean, on that point, I want to take you back 2 days now to that devastating Israeli attack on Nasser hospital in Gaza. We saw 20 people killed, including journalists once again. Netanyahu's narrative has been interesting, describing the attack as a tragic mishap. And then the latest justification seems to be from the Israelis that a Hamas camera was positioned near the hospital in order to capture Israeli military activity. Now, I mean, they're using a camera to justify this attack on a hospital. We've seen plenty of international condemnation. But once again, beyond that, it doesn't change what is happening on the ground.
No, not one bit. And frankly, I mean, these justifications, nobody is buying them except for people who have already essentially been sold on the entire idea of a genocidal assault in which Israel can do no wrong, right? That there is obviously states out there, governments, officials that have been enlisted in, Israel's efforts from the very beginning. But outside of that, no people, people who can reason through these arguments, see them as anything more than a distraction from the kind of never-ending and very deliberate assaults that we've seen. I mean, again, how is this any different than all of the massacres that happen on a regular basis? And when we take it all in totality, then these reasons not only ring hollow, but they're actually quite nonsensical and are insulting to one's basic intelligence.
Indeed. Abdullah Al-Arian, good to speak to you, Associate Professor at Georgetown University, Qatar.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.